Hello, I hope you all are doing well. Thank you so much for being here today. I apologize for this thing. It just doesn't want to go to either side. Gosh, where do we even start? The reason I'm making this video is because, well, many reasons, but really, it's when we look at what is going on right now in the world, and we're calling ourselves light beings, right? Which is essentially like, okay, stay in the light, stay in this vibration of love, come from a space of love. And yet you have to wonder at some point, are we bypassing here? Are we staying in our little temples or little spaces and just kind of speaking down to people who are in the crux of this unrest, you know? And I think what I've had to do, and I've been talking about how I've been so exhausted for so many weeks now, trying to figure out what the heck is going on. And over this weekend, it's been even more intense. Like, I can't even believe the level of just feeling like I get up every day and I can barely drag myself out of bed. And sleeping, not feeling rested. It's like something is here and I have not been able to push it off. And I really kind of broke down the other day because I think what I've been trying to do, and I share this because I think there are people who are probably experiencing this as well. With everything that's happening right now, and I am speaking particularly about the death of this man, George Floyd, and all of the protesting and looting and kind of unrest that is pretty rampant, at least where I live. So it's kind of, you know, and this is what they say about white privilege. It's like, well, you really don't look at it unless it's in your backyard, right? Like, oh, it doesn't bother me. It's not affecting me. So therefore, I'm not going to worry about it. And now I'm kind of in that place where it's like, not only is it in my backyard, it's also in my energy field. There's something here that has just been nagging me and I cannot get it to move off. And so feeling like, well, is it because I need to make a video? Do I need to say something? I don't know anything about, I don't understand the root of what is racism, you know, and trying to, and it's something that, you know, I explored years ago. It was brought to my attention, this idea of, it's not even an idea, right? It's like it is this white privilege, right? White supremacy, white fragility, and all these things that we do to perpetuate racism. And yet I see so many white people who come into this being so confused, right? Like, well, what can I do to help besides raise my boys not to be racist? And then all this kind of like back and forth, like, oh, your white privilege is showing just by making that statement, you know? And it's like, it's so confusing. And I have so many things that I want to say, and it's hard to say them all right in this one moment, right? Like, they all want to come through here, and it's like, but you have to talk through all of these things. And so the best way I know how to do this is just to kind of tell you the story of how all of this came to be in my own experience. Which is to say that I've been feeling something for a very long time and unable to really identify and label it and figure out what it is. Although this morning I woke up and I thought, oh God, like, this is it. Like, we can't, and we know this, right? We talk about just being in the divine feminine energy. We're not here to just be in the energy. We're here to express it through our physical form. We're here to bring it into the physical reality, to be embodiers of this light and of this love. And what does that mean? Because if I'm standing on the side here watching all these things happen and not saying anything about it, does that also make me a party to what's happening, you know? And so wrestling with all this stuff, and then the spiritual community says, well, stay in the vibration of love, right? Don't get pulled into all of the illusions that you're seeing around you. And I'm like, but people are being murdered in the streets. So if it was my son, would I be staying quiet about it? Would I not? Would I just stay in the light? Don't get pulled into those illusions. Like, okay, that doesn't make sense. That does not make any freaking sense. So, last Friday was, so I live in Illinois where, it's pretty locked down compared to other states. It's also a law that you have to wear a face mask here, right? So, and we've talked about this in the past, how everything that has happened has kind of been a trigger for empaths, for light beings, because we know this energy of oppression, right? We have experienced it in other lifetimes. It's in our cells, it's in our DNA. Even though we're not experiencing the physical form of it, we're being triggered energetically, right? So the lockdown at first came as a relief, like, oh God, now there's no pressure to have to show up in this, outside world and try to pretend like everything is okay when it really doesn't feel like it is. Maybe we're getting, some relief from this. Other people are getting a taste of what it feels like to be like this, to be a highly sensitive soul. And so we had all that kind of going on. And as more stores are opening up, right? So Friday was the first day where it was like, okay, we're moving into the next phase, which is we're reopening other kinds of stores. Suddenly, like, all kinds of people are out. And I'm thinking, like, this is crazy. Why? Like, most of these stores have already been open. Yeah, the malls reopened and whatever. But it's like, but you could still go out and go to those kind of, whatever, Target, where they have everything, right? Like, you could still get stuff. It's not like you had to stay home and wait for these stores. So it's like, why all of a sudden people just decide, oh, because the government says we're reopening, we should go out and reopen. And like, so it was just crowded, and I was frustrated and irritated because I was like, I actually had just things to do, which is what I normally do, and it's been nice to experience that kind of like lull and just people being around. And so it was very aggravating to me. And yet what I also saw was a lot of people also being just in this space of aggravation and anger, like, kind of zipping in and out and like, flooring the engine, right? You're like hearing all this kind of zooming and revving of engines, and like people like impatient, and you can just see it in the way they're driving, a lot of impatience, a lot of upset, a lot of subconscious anger in the fields, which was interesting to me. I didn't really expect that. And I had even said to my parents, I was like, it's really not safe to be out right now because there's something going on. Like, people are feeling something and they're not even aware that this is what they're feeling. So that was kind of the start of it. And then, of course, everything that happened Saturday, with the riots and the looting in the city, and then kind of started happening in the suburbs as well. And by Sunday afternoon, everything was completely shut down, right? So even stores that had been open during quarantine were now closing early because of the looting and all this kind of stuff. So it's been a weird weekend. But through it all, I felt even more heaviness and intensity in my own energy field, and like struggling with like, all right, what's going on here? Do I need to make a video? Do I need to say something? I don't really understand what's happening here. I don't really know what perspective to come from, because I am just kind of this person who is not physically, again, this isn't something I physically experience on a regular basis, right? So what is going on? And then before I came in today, there were these posts, like, we have this neighborhood kind of, I don't even know, some kind of social media thing, like Nextdoor, whatever it's called, right? So all the different neighborhoods have their groups, and then there's like this cross kind of pollinating between them. And so the town that my office is in, they had protests yesterday, which ended up turning violent, as they called them. I don't really know if it was looting or what exactly happened, right? But so the town that I live in, a couple towns over, is supposed to be having protests this evening, and people were saying, like, we should just not allow protests because they always turn violent. Like, you're just asking for it. And then, someone posting all lives matter, and I just kind of lost it. Like, the ignorance of white people and their inability to see this from a perspective different than their own, which is, I'm so upset my town is being destroyed. These people who are taking advantage of it and looting and da 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 da. Like, but also at the same time, you went along with the government shutting down all these businesses, which essentially are destroying them anyway. But because it was for your own good and for your health and safety, and they used fuzzy math and like it looked like a good argument, like that's okay. Because the same person was even commenting like, we're tired of being locked down and we just want to be whatever. Like, don't allow these protests. And I'm like, oh, what is happening here? Like, so, yes, all lives matter. But the point is that Black lives matter too. And you don't understand what it's like to walk down the street and be profiled just because of the color of your skin. And you have no idea what it's like to endure that emotional burden from white people who don't understand what it's like to walk around with that color of skin. Like, oh, I don't even know how to explain all this stuff, right? But this is what I feel. Was this a racist act? Yes. Is this racism going on in our country? Yes. Why have we not solved this issue? Because it's not just about racism. It's much more systemic than that. And part of what I've been struggling with is, okay, I'm being told to just stay in my light and to stay in the higher vibration and not get pulled into the disillusionment of everything that's happening in the physical world. And yet that doesn't feel right to me either, because there are people around me who are clearly not understanding this other, they cannot see it from anything but their own vision and their own perspective, right? And it's like, this is exactly what we talk about all the time in this work, which is that someone's ability, the ability to take someone else's life or to destroy another human being through trauma, through imposing your trauma onto someone else. The only reason that can happen is if they are themselves disconnected from their own light, right? And this is really, I don't want to say it's the root of racism, but this is why these acts occur at all, is because these beings are disconnected from their own selves, right? But why is it so prevalent? Why does it come across in these kind of symptomatic expressions in this way? Well, because it's swept under the rug and because it's allowed to fester in so many different ways, then we see things like white cops kneeling on the neck of a black man and not moving to allow him to breathe. Like, what kind of rage do you have inside of you that can even happen through your cells and your DNA? You know, it's incomprehensible. And yet, I realized as I was watching another man speaking about a totally different incident, but he was talking about a young black man who had gone for a jog in a neighborhood, who was seen by two white men, and these two white men assumed that he fit the profile of a robbery suspect, and so they went and got their guns and basically hunted this man down, right? Fortunately, I'm not sure exactly what happened, but these white men were, charged, and it's pending, I guess, investigation. I don't really know the outcome of it. But I realized as this man was sitting here and telling the story, expressing his emotions, and I was so moved by his energy and by his love for human beings And just in his humanness, I thought, I don't even know if I know this kind of energy in my own life, right? Like, I would love to have a man like this in my world, in my family, in my community, who lived with this much passion and expression, and who could talk about what he was feeling and experiencing and allow the tears to roll down his face. It was so moving to me. But what I also realized is that these white men that he was talking about, I grew up with these white men. I know these white men intimately. These are the same white men that I am afraid of, that I was afraid to speak up and express myself for fear that I would be beaten. Now, I'm not comparing my situation to racism at all. But in that moment, I'm realizing we are fighting the same thing here. And so when suburban white women say, what can I do besides teaching my boys not to be racist? Well, all of you who are staying in abusive relationships, allowing these narcissistic, and it could be men and women too, right? It doesn't, but we do see it more prevalent because of how the system has been set up, right? It's just, that's the way it is. And I don't really think it's an overgeneralization to say that. But it's this power and this fear that these narcissistic individuals exhibit. And I've talked about this all along in my work, right? It's like, this is essentially the crux of what this is. It's the disconnection from one's own light. It displays in these narcissistic personality types. It is this overpowerment of another. It is, because they are so disconnected from their own selves, they have to exert force and oppression over others in order to survive. And I imagine what happened at that time was there was deep fear, deep rage that was triggered, right? And I would imagine this is what happens for most hate crimes. And really even the ability to murder someone, right, is like, you are so disconnected from your own self. You're so disconnected from who you are. And unfortunately, we tend to surround ourselves with people who also encourage or support or are in alignment with our perspective and our point of view, right? So it may not seem that extreme to certain groups of people, but that's because they all, to a certain degree, hold a level of that, right? And they're able to justify and tell them things and like, look, this supports what we're doing or how we're feeling and this kind of thing. But it dawned on, so, and I think I was gonna say, like, what I was struggling with today, like I said, is like, how can I just say, oh, I'm staying in my light and I'm avoiding all of these things around me, all of the negativity? It's like, that doesn't feel right to me. And really it's about, what is my truth and what is my alignment, and does that stand up against what I am witnessing in the world? You know, it was about finding, how does this make sense for me? And what I do truly believe with all my heart is that we are fighting the same animal here, which is essentially everything I've been talking about all along. It's this, you can call it a demon seed, right? I saw someone posting, you know, the cop who committed this crime is really a demon. And it's like, well, I wouldn't disagree with that, right? Because what is really a demon? It is so it's completely disconnected from source light, right? And feeding off of the light of other people. And this is essentially what happens. So I'm not sure that's far from the truth at all. And yet what we need to look at, it's not, because if we keep just saying this is about race, it's about racism, it's about not being able to love someone of a different colored skin, we are missing the wider picture here. And obviously we know we haven't been able to solve this issue, right? It's been ongoing ever since. This country was built on the oppression of people of color. Like, But I think for myself, it's recognizing, okay, how am I allowing this to perpetuate? It may not be about the color of someone's skin in my everyday experience, but it is about the way that I allowed myself to be treated, allowed myself to stay in a relationship where my children were learning that, you know what, it's okay not to face your own demons, and it's okay to take out your rage and your anger on someone else in order to make yourself feel better, but then the trauma that you're inflicting on that person that they will then carry out into the world, right? Like, that was my role in it. And I remember years ago, I think it's like, what are we doing as spiritual white women in these little temples, right, of light? It's like allowing these demon seeds to continue to populate, allowing ourselves to be taken advantage of. I was watching the Jeffrey Epstein series, which, again, it's one of these things where I was like, why am I watching this? Like, I have no interest in this, but it all starts to come together, right? And this is what's always interesting about my experiences, is that they build this story and this understanding. But what was so awful about that movie was that here is a very powerful white man, money, powerfully protected because of the secrets that he knew, right? And the people that he was connected with. But more than that, it was really the secrets of the people that he was connected with that protected him. Because he had taken videos of everything that went on in his house, right? So anyway, he would bring... Here's the thing though, right? Like, we've been talking about the dark divine feminine, how she is actually allowing and perpetuating this distorted divine masculine, which is exactly what we're seeing here. It's like, so in this Jeffrey Epstein movie, he was an introvert. He really did not kind of go out looking for these girls to bring them back to his place. It was the woman he was with who was the one who said, hey, you should come back, blah, 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 bring your friends. Hundreds, I don't know how many girls, to be honest, but it was like every girl brought in more girls, right? Hundreds? Could we say, I don't know, was it up to thousands? It sounded like it could reach that number of women that he ended up sexually abusing. What was so scary about it was that these girls were all in high school, right? So they were all underage. They were 13, 14, 15 years old, and they all said the same thing. It's like, I didn't know what I was going there for. I was just told that I could make some money. Before I knew it, I'm in this situation and where I was very highly uncomfortable. But I was afraid of saying no. I didn't know what was going to happen to me if I said no. And so I just stayed. And when it was done, I left. And I ran, or whatever it was, right? But it's like, what is going on here? That a man can lure all of these girls into his home, and this can go on for years and years and years. And why is it that all of these girls were telling the exact same story? Their inability to stand up and say no. And there were a couple of girls, maybe only just one in this video, but one that said no to him, right? And nothing happened to her physically. He just said, well, if you know any friends, you can bring them to me and I'll still pay you, blah, 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 which is what she ended up doing, right? But like, there was some kind of fear that is perpetuating in the system, which is keeping them from standing up for themselves, right? Even though they knew inside inherently, like, this is wrong. I have no idea what to do though. And so this narcissistic man, this sick man, totally disconnected from his own light, right, was allowed to continue what he was doing. And not only that, this woman supported him. All these other very powerful men supported him. And what about the wives of all those other men? It's like, what does this have to do with racism? Well, it's the exact same energy. Like this disconnection, this narcissism, this anger and rage that resides within someone who is disconnected from their own light, it's always there, right? We don't know exactly what kind of situation they will find themselves in one day where they blow up and end up committing these acts of violence, right? And what happened to Jeffrey Epstein and it's the same energy. It will show up in different places at different times, be triggered by different things. But it is this hatred of oneself, this inability to be in touch with one's own light and one's own heart space. And so, what are we supposed to do? And I think it's to keep doing what we have been doing, which is this rigorous self-awareness, self-work, right? Wherever we run into these energies, where we are within judgment of another, we know this from this work, right? It's like we turn inside and we know that it's somewhere in us. It has to be in us somewhere in order for us to project that out into the world. And yet so many people, and especially white men, right, will be like, well, no, it's their fault. They're causing me to feel this way. This is what my ex-husband told me, right? Like, it's your fault. Look at everything you're doing. The reason I'm so upset, you're making me feel this way. You're making me do this. And I would think, oh, you must be right. Of course, that makes sense. But it's not, right? But this is the same thing. It's like these people get triggered and they commit acts of murder in this case. But why was no one holding him accountable before that? Because you don't generally murder someone to start with. You rage. You hit someone. You are abusive in some way before you get to that level. But it builds, right? So it's like the first time, let's say it's a child, right? Like being judgmental. And then that's encouraged, right? Like, oh yeah, good for you. Knowing the difference between right and wrong, but we're not seeing the lower basis of that, which is that, well, you're actually judging and you're drawing a conclusion, and now you're spreading that conclusion to everything that you're seeing that looks similar. But that's not the case. Like, each individual is an individual situation. We can't overgeneralize in that way, right? And say, well, because I had an awful experience with an orange, all oranges are going to taste bad. We know that's not true. But yet, somehow, this is what perpetuates, right? When it comes to humans. And why is that? Well, we know it's the systems and the programs. But our work is to see where we have this inside of us, where we allow it to perpetuate in our own selves, and therefore then where we allow that abuse to be directed towards us from others. And to react then and allow that to perpetuate. So, is this about racism? Absolutely. Is there something much greater within us than just observing what has happened over here and saying, well, that has nothing to do with me. I would never commit a murder. I would never murder someone because of the color of their skin. Well, people don't wake up planning to do that in most cases. And certainly no one is born out of the womb thinking that. That is created. And the way it's created is much more subtle than talking about being racist. It starts with our own disconnection with our own light when we are raising children, right? And the way that we perpetuate these prejudices, which don't look like prejudices compared to what we're talking about in the greater realm, right? But it is. And I think that we know this now from doing this work. It's like, why am I waking up with these angry thoughts of hatred towards people. Like, I don't even know, this isn't me. And as a light being, you're able to see that and feel that and recognize there is something in your field you need to root out. Yes, you don't act on it. Sometimes we do, right? If it's verbal, we may lose our stuff. But that's the work. It's to root it out within ourselves. So it's challenging because we want to stay in that, like, what we've been doing, what we, you know, at least in the past too, it was like, oh, you stay in this space of love and light and that's it, right? Like, that's how you're going to change the world. And yet we need a deeper understanding than that of where this comes from, of why that is so important, right? Because if you're like, oh, I see that, but I'm just going to go stand over here because this is what people are telling me to do. It's like you're not consciously making that connection and understanding why is that the space to be standing in. But also, it's not just standing there, it's actively running that through your field, which means wherever you are feeling resistance, wherever you are feeling judgment, wherever you are feeling oppression within your own field, you have to look at that and figure out where and why that is. And allow the light to come in to clear that out, right? So that we're not perpetuating those patterns and those systems. So, I think the tip of the iceberg was reading these comments, you know, in this neighborhood forum, and just realizing how people do not, I mean, it's so similar to the virus, right? They really don't understand what's going on at the base of this. Like, it's not about businesses getting looted, but that's all people can see, right? Because that's what's, oh, it's destroying my community. That's not what's destroying your community. What's destroying your community, and it's so subtle, but because it's so subtle, you keep sweeping it under the rug and you allow it to continue, and now it's festering in your town, in your city. But you're going to point the finger and say, oh, it's those people that are looting. No, it's not that. It started somewhere inside of you, somewhere down the line in your lineage. It's been allowed to perpetuate. We're all responsible for what is happening right now. But at the same time, we all have the ability to shift this and change this. But where are we going to continue to point the finger and say, there's a dog, that dog must have been the one that pooped on the sidewalk. It's not me, you're the bad one. Okay, well, it's not in my backyard, so therefore I'm not going to worry about it. It's not me that's causing it, but we are, because we're all connected. We're all a part of the collective. You know, where are there bullies on the playground and you're not speaking up and seen as the mean person? It's all connected. It's all a part of it. It's a huge entangled system. And so while you may not understand what it's like to be a person of color, you are certainly aware of the things that you are sweeping under the rug in your own household, in your own family, in your own community. You know, and to say it's law enforcement, well, certain types of careers will attract a certain type of person because they are then free to exert a certain type of control. We see this within the churches, though, right? Like, it's no different. And yet, I don't see the outrage there saying, well, all priests are pedophiles. Well, we know they go into that because they will have access to children, right? It's one of those things where it's like, well, here's an easy way to obtain what I want. Here's an easy way to feed my light because I don't know how to feed it myself. So to sit and blame law enforcement in general and say, well, these cops need to be trained not to do these kinds of things, that's brushing off your own responsibility as well. It just is. Because we all play a role in this. We're all connected to this in some way. And we need to figure out where that is within us, inside of us, that we're allowing this to perpetuate. And really, it comes down to being able to allow ourselves to see from a different perspective, allow ourselves to be open to learning something new. Instead of making these judgments and coming from a place of, if you're a Trump supporter, just unfriend me now. It's not about, like, you cannot take a stand in a specific spot anymore and just be like, this is right and that's wrong. Like, are you, like, that's so archaic to be in that kind of mindset, because we know everything holds pieces of distortion. To be so ignorant is to say, well, this is right and that's wrong. It just doesn't exist anymore. And we're not going to be safe in those places. Like, we can't hide in those places any longer at all. And we have to hold, we say this, right? Like this 360-degree vision of our own selves, our own field. We have to hold that for the external reality as well. There's always more than meets the eye. There's always more to be uncovered and understood. And this all starts internal to us, where we're holding into these patterns. And where we don't understand, where we're in confusion, it's to seek out information that will clarify things for us. So, if you're not able to understand how you contribute to racism, like, just Google it. There's plenty of resources out there. But again, it's the same thing we see in this energy work, right? Like, we don't want to face our shadows because we feel like, well, even if I find them, I don't know what to do with them, right? Like, am I going to have to live with this awareness for the rest of my life? Or like, is this going to be stuck in me? And it seems to be the same thing when it comes to racism, right? It's a very scary word, and people back away from it because they're like, oh, I don't know how to handle it. I don't even know. I don't understand. What am I doing? You're telling me I'm being racist. But I don't feel like I'm judging people, and I don't think I'm doing what and it's a much larger animal than this. But to stand back in our ignorance and say, well, I'm just going to go garden in my backyard because I don't see any of this there, and turn off social media because then I stay sane. Which, again, I get that, right? We don't want to pump negativity into ourselves, into our fields. But there does come a point in time where we have to say, I'm not turning it off because I can't comprehend and I don't understand. Right? It's turning it off when you say, okay, I realize my place in this. I understand fully what's going on here, how I am contributing, how I will not continue to contribute to this. Right? And then we can continue to move forward. But it feels like we're all very stuck right now in this place of like, but the world is falling apart. Doesn't that mean I need to come in here and help? But yet I'm being told to stand in the light, and yet I don't know how to do all of this at the same time simultaneously. And my heart is breaking for everything that's happening. So how can I just turn away and stay in the light? Is there something else we need to do here? And yeah, maybe it's to lift these other people up through the light. By taking a look at people we don't necessarily, or in situations we don't necessarily understand, trying to understand them, right? I mean, we see this in our daily life all the time. It's like someone comes in and they're telling us a story and we're like, well, why would you do that? Like, I don't get it, right? Like, but this is where we have this massive lack of communication, massive lack of empathy for other people. It's all a part of the same thing. And where we want to stay back and are kind of, again, this like behind the fence, within our little temple of light, in our little garden backyard, because there isn't any rioting happening back there. It's happening in the businesses and Main Street. So don't go near Main Street, right? Like, and can someone go in and stop those people because they're destroying my town? Let's open this up a little bit. Let's be a little bit more mature. And it's about trying to find our role in all of this. Because we all play a role. And we do. Energetically, it's impossible not to. So, okay. I hope that was helpful. I tried to record this several times, so I probably either repeated myself or left out a whole bunch of things thinking I already said it. But we are here to anchor in this energy. But you will find that if you're kind of trying to do it with blinders on, you're going to feel the pain and the pressure of that, right? So, again, we're doing this in a totally new way where we are embodying all of this. And it doesn't mean where maybe in the past, let's just stay in our light and let's just stay in our heart center. And this is how we're going to do, let's do a world meditation to lift people up. That's great. Yes, we need the energy of that. But also we're here. Our boots are on the ground, And you can make a difference. You can make an actual physical difference. So just be in awareness of that. I wish you all a wonderful rest of your day. Take good care.